Welcome to WorksheetCloud Grade 9 English. I am Mrs. Notia and I am going to be your Grade 9 English teacher for today, for the next 25 minutes or so anyway. And before we get going with anything, just in case something is unclear to you throughout the lesson or you feel that you require a little bit more information, please do feel free to contact grade 9 at worksheetcloud.com, and then any questions or queries that you have will be addressed from there. Right, so now that we have some of the admin out the way, let's get going. So today we're going to be doing a poem, and the poem is called Autumn. I think just by the title and the picture in the background, you may have guessed that it is definitely about the season autumn. And I know often nature poems might not seem very appealing, but I think what's so sort of universal about it is that firstly, we all know the seasons, so we can all relate on that level. And I think an appreciation of nature is definitely something that the world is calling for at the moment. We all know how we feel so much better when we're outside in nature and in fresh air. And just with all, the problems of global warming and pollution and things like that that are so sort of frightening and important right now, it's always interesting to see how poets from hundreds of years ago would write these poems about appreciating nature. And I sometimes almost feel like it was a bit of a warning. I like to think of it like that because it makes it a lot more relevant and important. So next time you have to do a nature poem or a poem that centers around nature, try and understand it more or appreciate it more in the context in which we live, because that might help you a little bit more. All right, so autumn is one of my favorite seasons. My absolute favorite is winter. I know some people think I'm crazy. Let me start this little video here. And your favorite season is and why? Not just, okay, my favorite season's winter. So for me, the connotations of winter, as you can see there, I think of snug and comfortable and warm. I can stay at home. And those are things that I enjoy about winter. So for me, winter isn't about just the cold in the season, it's the feelings it creates. Right, so that is my experience of why I love winter necessarily. Then, if you think about spring, I'm not a huge spring fan. I don't know if it's because I feel as though the weather's so uncertain during that time, but I know a lot of people love spring because it's about new beginnings. Right, and then most people I know love summer. Okay, people are all summer is amazing. I don't like summer because I hate the heat, but the connotation of summer, like spending time with friends and crying and lovely long evenings, obviously that I can relate to. Right, and then we come back to autumn. Autumn, as you can see here, autumn always has those sort of vivid colors. I know living in the city, we don't really get to see the oranges and the browns of the autumn leaves very often. But I know, for instance, I often used to visit Greyton, a little or town in the Western Cape, and I loved the autumn colors there. And I love autumn. I feel like in Cape Town anyway, we get the best autumn weather, and it's still in that middle phase where you can do lovely lunches and picnics on the lawn just before it becomes too cold. So basically, the essence of what I'm saying to you here is all seasons have a meaning. Winter, for some people, is desolate and dark. For others, it's all about family and being around the fire. Spring is about new beginnings. Autumn is, like I said to you, those little lazy lunches and picnics, and summer is all about braais and evenings and the sunsets. So everyone has a certain connotation as to why they enjoy a certain season. Now, the poet that we're looking at today, normally just goes by Roy Campbell, was a very famous South African poet, and he writes a poem, yes, labeled Autumn, but he actually brings in all the seasons. It ends the poem in more of a celebration, actually, or it starts rather with a celebration of winter. And what he's trying to show us is that the seasons are so interlinked. Nature is so powerful that nature just knows when to switch over to the next season. And each season brings something so different, and all of it is joined together to give us a whole year of produce, of climate, of beauty. Okay, so it's entitled Autumn, but it's very much about all the seasons. So the poet describes what he loves about autumn. The trees start losing leaves, the geese start migrating, trees and vines are filled with fruits. You can make olive oil from it, grapes, obviously you can make wine. Even the dry branches can be used now for warm fires. So everything is interdependent. What we might see as death and darkness, like the dead trees and the dead bark during winter, it has a use that kind of carries us through to spring. Right? So everything is linked and independent. He feels that autumn provides good change. Right? So grapes become wine, olives can become olive oil, autumn becomes winter. These are positive changes that we receive from this natural world. And we often take it very for granted that these things just happen. Just an image I want to discuss with you before we get into the poem is the image of the rising of the phoenix from the ashes. Now, the phoenix here, a bird. I'm trying to simplify it as much as possible. And it's often said that the phoenix was a symbol of rebirth. So the phoenix was this strong image that rose from the ashes and from the fire. And how it is used in the poem, it's almost like winter is a rebirth. We use the dead of winter, the branches, everything is very barren, but we use that to create, and from that stems spring. And then obviously a new birth, a new beginning of a new cycle. Right, so I'm going to read the poem. While I read it, you can look here at the representation of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Make sure you know the way that the seasons change. Obviously, in South Africa, we would have spring starting in September. Then we have summer, which takes us through December, Jan, Feb. Then we have March, April, May, which is our autumn months. And then we have June, July, August, which is our winter months. So just to give you that breakdown, that's obviously Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere will be different. All right, so I'm going to read the poem. He starts off very much with winter. I love to see, when leaves depart, the clear anatomy arrive. Winter, the paragon of art, that kills all forms of life and feeling, save what is pure and will survive. Of geese are harnessed to the moon, stripped are the great sun-clouding plains, and dark pines their own revealing, let in the needles of the noon. Strained by the gale, the olives whiten like hoary wrestlers bent with toil, and with the vines their branches lighten, to brim of vats where summer lingers in the red froth and sun-gold oil. Soon, on our heart's reviving pyre, their stems will crumble up, and like a ruby panting fire, the grape will redden on your fingers through the lit crystal of the cup. I like to think that loosely, this is winter to spring to summer, ending in a celebration of autumn. I mean, keeping in with the fact that the poem is entitled Autumn. So I like to look at it like that, how each leads to the next season and then links quite clearly. Right, so like I said, we start with winter, we go into spring, there we go, we then go into summer, and we end with a celebration of beautiful, vivid autumn. All right, let's start looking at the poem. Now, this poem is very detailed, and I don't want to throw you off by going through every last little thing. So what we're going to do is look at the basics of the stanzas and how we can just use that as an appreciation for that season. So here where it says, I love to see when leaves depart. Leaves departing, it's leaves leaving. But he loves to see when the leaves start falling from the trees. And then what's left behind is just the actual anatomy. Think of a skeleton. So everything's fallen, and now you've just got those branches and the stump. It's 100% the purest form of that tree. For him, that is the absolute perfection. Epitome means the absolute highest level. Perfection of winter is saying that everything else, the life and the feeling, the leaves, all of that leaves, and we're left with the absolute purest form of survival. So yes, winter might take away all what we think is pretty, the leaves, the flowers, all of that. But what it does is it leaves behind the purest form of the tree, almost like the purest form of art. So he thinks winter is very beautiful in that way. So don't think of winter as desolate and dark and depressing and, it's ugly. No, it leaves behind the purest form of nature. See, I'm a big winter lover. So just there to give a little bit here. So here you can see this is what we mean by the absolute anatomy of a tree. There's no leaves, there's no flowers, there's no lovely greenery. In fact, it looks pretty dead. But it is the absolute outline, the clearest perfection of what a tree looks like. Therefore, he says that even though winter deadens everything, it is the perfect example of art. It strips away the bare essentials and leaves for us what can last. Okay, I keep wanting to giggle at the leaves and the leaves, all right? It's a teacher pun thing. And then the anatomy is this clear outline. And remember, later when we get to the autumn stanza, he talks about how these dead branches give us life in the form of fire. So everything in nature has a very specific purpose. Okay, so that was our winter stanza, and it was about the pure perfection of what winter brings us. Now we're going to go into what I like to call the spring stanza. So for me, the biggest thing you need to know from this stanza is to have this image in your mind. Have you ever looked up at the sky and you've seen the birds flying in this perfect V formation? Now, a lot of the times, in this poem, it's linking it very much to migration. So when the birds fly, it's almost like they are linked in a little chain. And therefore, he says, the clanging chains of geese are harnessed to the moon. So it's like they're pulling it along, they're harnessed to the moon, pulling it along. And they're like little links of a chain that all work together. All right, so again, this beauty of nature. Now, the sun is trying to start peeping through the clouds. Why? Because spring is coming. So it's kind of the end of that winter, beginning now of spring. And what's interesting to note is that the pine needles, firstly, that talk about the needles of the noon, the sun's peeping through the pine needles. So think of this beautiful image of standing in a forest and the sun is starting just to peep through. That is spring, this new life coming, this new cycle, the sun, it's bringing us warmth again. And never mind that, with it, we start seeing the perfection of animals, birds, that are so interlinked and part of this whole process. Okay, now let's look at what summer provides us. So here's the stanza again. Strained by the gale. Gale is wind. If you live in Cape Town, you know about strong winds. I know Port Elizabeth is called the Windy City. I used to live there, so I feel as though I can compare. For me, Cape Town is much windier. I just think that PE has a lot of windier days. It's windy for a longer period of time. Anyway, total sidetrack. But here he speaks about the wind. And in Cape Town, that also does bring about summer. We know it's windy in summer. And what starts to happen is the following. Olive trees or olive vines, think of them, they're very interlinked. Have you seen vines before? Linked like this. Like hoary wrestlers. Hoary means old, so gray-haired. Like wrestlers bending over each other. Now you might think, why must it be gray? So when the olive trees start, or when the olives start to ripen, the leaves of the tree start turning white. So it will look like white-haired wrestlers straining in the vines. And that's when you know that it's starting to ripen in summer. Now, when these branches lighten, we realize now you can start making red froth and sun gold oil. So you can start making olive oil from the olives. The red froth is linking us now to autumn, the next paragraph, where we can start making wine from grapes. So in summer, a lot of the production happens. All right, so let me go on here just for that summary slide. And here you can also see how it starts to gently whiten as it gets to a riper stage. So summer is when we have the harvesting taking place. We're now receiving the produce. So winter stripped it down. Spring gave it new life. Summer, we start producing this produce, and we start getting the rewards, if you will, from it. All right, so now we go to his favorites. The poem is all about autumn. The last paragraph, stanza, just culminates in this image of autumn. And now I'm going to bring in that phoenix. Remember the bird rising from the ashes of the fire. So now he says, once we've gone through winter, into spring, into summer, we now start slipping into autumn. We can use these branches that are dying, because remember in autumn, everything starts being stripped away for winter. And what we can do is we can use it for a fireplace. So a hearth, we can put that wood and use it to start getting nice and cozy and warm. A pyre is what refers to, it's like a slab of concrete, and that is what links us to the phoenix rising from this ashes from the pyre, just like fire rises now in our hearth from these broken or dead branches. And now, while we're sitting there cozy in this rebirth of fire, it talks about rubies. Rubies are red, and how the grape will redden on our fingers through the lit crystal of the cup. So this beautiful image of red wine coming from this poem. And think about it as well. I want you to look here. He spoke here about sun gold. He then speaks about rubies, which are red, also grapes, and he even mentions red. And here we have the image of a fire, which is orange. So orange, gold, red. Those colors go with which season? Autumn. So everything builds up and everything has its little elements and brings out that absolute beauty, vivid colors, vivid colors and fireplaces and wine. This is for your parents, obviously. But just those connotations of the beauty of autumn. Then what happens? Autumn again leads to winter, where everything is stripped away and we now start the cycle over. Right, so I think this poem in here, you can see these beautiful autumn colors. I keep saying winter, but it's because I love it. These beautiful autumn colors that lead to winter. And I really think this poem, it just so vividly shows us how nature knows to work together. We don't control it. We don't put on a switch and say, now it's autumn, now it's winter. Nature knows this. So, in saying that, the theme of this poem, it's the perfection of winter, the power of change, which leads to our appreciation of nature and autumn. Here's also just a little block that shows you again how it all comes together. The tone and mood, which is always sort of your feelings associated with the poem. It's the appreciation for the season. Summer gives us grapes. Autumn, we can relish the harvest. Winter, you can enjoy what has been relished. And then it ends with this warm, satisfied emotion. I also think the poet is in total amazement of what the seasons do. All right, knowing to work together from spring to summer to autumn, back to winter, and we start all over again. And I think if we start to understand that pure majesty and power of nature, we have to keep it safe. Because if we start destroying these processes, we're going to obviously end up with a lot of environmental problems, which we are sitting with now. But if we can start being a bit more aware of how to appreciate and how to combat the issues of global warming and environmental pollution, that's definitely going to help. All right, so thank you for watching Grade 9s. This lesson was brought to you by WorksheetCloud. I hope that you enjoyed our wonderful journey through the seasons, almost like we went through a year there, and just learned from it that we need to appreciate this very powerful force that exists, and we need to appreciate and just take some time to look and realize how lucky we are. All right, guys, have a lovely rest of day. I hope that it is a good one and it treats you well. I'm Mrs. Nortia, and I'm saying goodbye for now.